Good day and welcome. Thank you very much for tuning into this video. I'd also like to say a special word of thanks to the South African Strings Convention team for giving me the opportunity to speak about this topic. The topic I'm addressing has to do with relaxation, posture. I'm also touching on anxiety in children. It's mostly about children because that has been my focus for the last few years of teaching. The topic of anxiety is touched on very slightly in this presentation because that is a topic on itself. That can be a whole video on itself. I'd like to also look at anatomy and how certain muscles gets affected by certain positions of instruments. Let's look at the most obvious one of these points that I'd like to address, which is posture. Posture plays a big role in any musician's life. With some instruments, like the violin, it's necessary to carry the weight on either side of the body. Other instruments like this includes the viola, of course, and also instruments like the saxophone, the bassoon, the French horn, which is carried on the other side, on the right-hand side. Some instruments are at the front, like trombone, trumpet, clarinet, oboe. Different instruments get carried in a different way, but I'm sure all of you know this. With the violin, it's on your left-hand side, and that is, of course, my focus, violin and viola. It is very important to check that the children's feet, that they put equal weight on both feet and in both legs. Children are they want to stand on one foot or the other. They don't necessarily want to stand with weight on both legs. I remember when I was studying, one of the first things that actually Louis van der Walt told me was you can ask the child to jump up and jump down, and then they will land with their weight on both feet. With most children, this works very well. If the children has a slight scoliosis in their back, which is a bit of a bend of the spine, it might not happen that easily, but it is possible to work with these children as well to get them to put their weight on both feet. I check that students stand with their weight on both feet and legs as often as possible, especially in the first lessons, in the beginner lessons. When weight is put on one leg more than the other, they get used to that, and later in life it might cause some challenges, some physiological challenges. Stress. Muscles tense up when they want to compromise for other muscles. So if this comes back to the child standing on one leg more than the other. If the one hip gets more weight, the other hip muscles, the other side's hip muscles want to compromise for that, which means the other side will get sore and not the side that actually needs attention. While it's important to hold your instrument correctly, you must check that the student stands on both feet. That is very important to me and to most teachers, I'm pretty sure. Children's muscles are still developing. That's why it's very important to check that they use it correctly. Now, violin and viola posture has the instrument on the left-hand side, but they also have the bow on the other side. Now, the bow does carry less weight than the instrument, but it doesn't mean it's weightless. The bow gets held in a very specific way. All of you know this. But with this comes the small motor function in the fingers that need to hold the bow, and the kids struggle with that. We all know this, struggle with holding the bow correctly. But if they don't hold it correctly and they don't check that they put enough, that they use the weight in their arms will get sore. But I'm sure most of the violin teachers that are listening in have seen this before. Because the bow is held in a very specific way, it's important that their finger muscles develop to handle it. I sometimes tell my students to use a stress ball to make their fingers stronger so that they can hold the bow easier. While it's very important to talk about posture and how you should stand or how the child should stand, it's also important to speak about stretching. Now, with small children, they don't all think it's fun because they don't have the patience necessarily to stand in a certain position for 5 to 10 seconds. That is a stretch for their muscles. So you must try and make them enjoy it. They don't, even though their physiological state is resilient, they also stress like adults. So stretching is good for them. Now, the first one is more of a positioning exercise that I try to do in some of my lessons. It's letting them hang over and letting their head hang so that their neck muscles relax. And also the muscles next to their spine when they hunch over to hang. It's very important to check that the weight is equally on both legs. Again, it's very important for all of these types of things. The second thing that I also do is rolling the shoulders backwards and forwards so that the shoulder muscles get to move. Breathing deeply while they do this is very important, because if you breathe, oxygen goes into the muscles. Oxygen makes the muscles be able to stretch more. It makes it relax more. So that's why breathing while playing is also very important. I'm sure everybody's teachers here have said, breathe while you play. It's very important because it makes your muscles relax. Also, of course, standing with equal weight on both legs here. It's also very important. Turning the head left and right while breathing deeply also relaxes the neck muscles very, very much. But of course, breathing while doing it. Of course, now, I know some people will now say, but I teach short lessons. How am I going to do all of these stretches? If you are like me and you teach 30-minute or 45-minute lessons, not necessarily an hour, you know that there isn't time for all of these exercises in one lesson. That's why we try to do it, or I try to do it in every second or third lesson of the beginning, and then it becomes a routine for the child, or it might become a routine for the child. You can maybe mention to the child that this is something you can do before or after you play, when your muscles are sore or your arm is sore. Hang over. It's very important that it kind of becomes a routine for them, so that they know they can do it at any time. The next point I'd like to address is about how all children are different. It's very important to remember that some children are more tense than others. Some children might tense up immediately when they do something incorrectly, or when you tell them that it's a bit incorrect. They might tense up immediately. Some children will just be naturally calm and naturally relaxed. They're all different. All students should be told to relax and enjoy their instrument. As soon as they get told to enjoy their instrument, they relax immediately. If you neglect to tell the children that is naturally tense to relax, they might never relax while playing. That's why tell it to all your students in the beginning. I'm sure most of you do this, but it's very important to remember, or at least in the first few lessons, starting the lessons by telling the student that enjoyment of the instrument helps a lot. I'm sure all of you know that music education is more about educating the child as a whole. And that's also a completely different topic on itself. I'm not even going to mention anything else about that. If the child is more tense, you can do more of these stretches, the positioning, hanging over, rolling shoulders, just so that you know their muscles will relax. Children's stress manifests differently. They might scream, they might throw tantrums, or they might show it in their body. Most of them do show it in their body. Their back gets tensed up. Laughing in lessons, even though I know that it's important to be strict and important to have the child do what you asked them to do in the previous lesson, if the child wants to tell you a story, I always listen, because, it might make them laugh, it makes them relax. Relaxing is very important to me, and it's very important that the child is comfortable with you. I said earlier that I will touch on the subject of anxiety in children. It's something that I'm still researching, that's why I'm not going to say a lot about it. Children tend to stress about things that we don't always understand, we as the teachers, and the stress manifests differently. The children might, as I said earlier, might scream, might cry, or they might become totally silent. But the point is, their posture will show it, or their muscles will show it. Their muscles will tense up. Now, when muscles tense up, other muscles tend to compromise for them, because the muscles that tense up work harder. That's why when we are playing violin, or the children is playing violin, and their left hand side, the back muscles work so hard, It might be the right back muscles that get sore, or the right neck muscles that get sore, because they compromise for the muscles that are working harder on the left-hand side. Coming back to anxiety, anxiety is something that you might see for the first time when the child has been on stage. Now, anxiety and being on stage can also be a topic on its own. Some want to do it naturally. Some children want to naturally play in front of people. They want to do it. Other children are skeptical about it. They don't necessarily want to play in front of people. These children can be put in a group if you really want them to experience the stage. I'm sure all of you know this. Anxiety, however, can happen to either one of these students. Even though they should also know that they should know to be very prepared for a performance. It is, of course, the best to be 120 or 130 or even 200% prepared for a performance. But if they are that prepared and they make a mistake, I feel, and I do this with my students, I feel it's important to tell them it's okay to make a mistake. Of course, you want the piece to be as perfect as possible. But if you know the child has practiced a lot, they need to know that it's okay to make a mistake. If they make a mistake and they will think about it, and they think it's a big thing, they will think about it for the rest of the piece, which means their mind will not be by the rest of the piece. I used to be like this. I used to make a mistake and I would think about it for the rest of the piece. It makes the rest of the piece not performed as well as it should be. I practice with my students to play over their mistakes. Eventually, the mistakes are not there, but I feel that if they do make a mistake, they should know that the error shouldn't define the performance. The error that they make, or the mistake that they make, shouldn't affect the rest. They should just let it go. Now, if you have a student that gets naturally tense, it will be worse for them. Students that are relaxed, generally, they don't worry about making mistakes. Now, a child should worry about making mistakes, especially if they don't practice that hard, because, of course, we have them. We have the children that don't practice hard or enough. But the children who perform and know they need to practice hard, they need to know that it is okay to make mistakes. In conclusion, it is very important to me that children know to relax. And it's very important to me that I teach relaxation to children in my lessons. This way, the stress doesn't define them. The stress doesn't make them, doesn't define their love for music, or doesn't make their love for music go away. I feel that it's very important for the child to know they enjoy what they're doing. Thank you very much.